Okay, so my disclaimer, as always, I want to tell you that all these talks that good morning, I should say that. How are you all? Pat is not here today. Let me back up. Pat is not here today. We gave my son and daughter-in-law last night and this morning, so they went out to the place that they got married at, and we took care of Braden. Actually, Pat took care of Braden overnight, but he slept for 11 hours, so it's a great thing. I had more problem with the cats than she had with him. Cats at 4 o'clock in the morning, the cats are fighting. Guys, give me a break here. Anyway, so Pat is with Braden and may be watching, although I doubt it. Roshi and Sensei, if you're watching, hi. They're not.
We're not live anymore.
Oh, we're not live anymore.
We're just going to record the videos and post them. So there's no more Facebook Live.
Bummer.
Yeah, because Facebook owns those videos, and so we'd rather have control over them.
Absolutely.
Oh, that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Facebook does too much without our knowing. Okay, so anyway, my disclaimer now. I do these talks, because I want to learn something, right? So I woke up this morning realizing I don't know crap about what I'm talking about today. I really don't. I've got pages and pages here, and but do I really know this? I don't know. I'm going to talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness today, but it's sort of circuitous because I'm not going to get there right away. You're going to wonder, what the heck is he doing? And at the end, there's a little twist. I hope. But I'd like us to start, well, wait a minute. Let's see. I say here, laughter expected, the next comment. I'm going to talk a lot. I always talk a lot. Okay, and I have a few activities. So here's the first one. I'd like you to read aloud with me this little gatha. Everybody ready? Commit not a single unwholesome act. Cultivate a wealth of virtue. Train this mind of ours. These are the teachings of the Buddhas. These are the teachings of the Buddhas, right? Or Buddha. So what's this gatha about? What's this gatha about? What's it telling us?
It's about discipline.
It's about discipline.
Lives.
How about, say that again?
How to live our lives.
How to live our lives.
Mindful intention.
Mindful intention. I think all those things, right? So I really love this. I actually learned this little verse when I was a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. And it just sat with me. At its root is the Bodhisattva vow. Commit not a single unwholesome act, cultivate a wealth of virtue. Do good for others. Do no harm. The 3 grave precepts, right? The Bodhisattva vow, in essence. And then there's that 3rd line. To train this mind of ours. And I used to read this thing and say it all the time and never thought about that second word, train. To train this mind of ours. Isn't training what Zazen is all about? Mm-hmm. We sit Zazen. And why do we sit Zazen? So I have a friend who said to me, well, some people I know sit Zazen so they can figure out all their problems. And then we had a whole discussion, and I said to him, I don't think so. He said, no, you don't do that. He said, but I know lots of people who sit there and fantasize about their problems all the time, and that's sitting Zazen to them. So, but what, for me, that's not what it is. Sitting Zazen is paying attention, right? And when I say paying attention, there's a lot of things to pay attention to, right? Mm-hmm. When we're sitting Zazen, we're not just staring at the wall like Bodhidharma for 9 years. Or we're not simply registering our breaths. When we sit, we do so to notice our thoughts and our feelings, our body, our sensations, the things happening around us, whatever we're doing, just sitting. We breathe and we notice, right? I do. I breathe and I notice. Sometimes I notice that I'm having a daydream, so I come back to my breathing or feeling my tuchus. Told my wife I was going to use the word tuchus, and she said, nobody's going to know what tuchus is.
Well, you did something.
I showed you what my tuchus is. We're sitting on it. But we breathe and we notice repeatedly. And we know, of course, from neuroscience that when we do something repeatedly, our brain changes. Neuroplasticity. We found out in the 21st century, or even in the 20th century, that in the 5th century BCE, they knew it all. They knew it. So the idea of training our minds through Zazen is not new. And it's not new to Buddhism. That was a stupid thing. Anyway, in Tibetan tradition, there's Lojong. What I meant is not new to Zen. Not new to Zen. It's not, Zen, Tibetan. So there's Lojong. And Lojong means mind training. And in the Lojong practice, which I think I'm going to talk about in February, but I may change my mind, Eve, just so you know. In the Lojong practice, there are 7 divisions of thoughts, or it's another word, verses, little things. And each of those 7 contains a number of verses or instructions. We, a couple of years ago, were studying the book by Fisher. What's this? Norman Fisher, about the Lojong interpreted for Zen. And it was pretty cool. It really was a nice way of looking at it. I think there are 59 phrases within 7 groups. And the whole purpose of it really is to get you to think about bodhicitta. Train your mind to engage your bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is defined as the wish to attain enlightenment, motivated by great compassion for all sentient beings. So when you're practicing your bodhicitta, you're practicing the bodhisattva vow. But it's mind training, okay? It's mind training. So in China, Chan was the early, those of you know me, I'm such an academic. Chan was the early version of Zen. And Chan Buddhists paid careful attention to all of this. And Dogen, when he went to China and came back, and when he came back, he had all these ideas that he'd learned from his master, Rujing, who was in China. And when he came back, right after he came back, he wrote Ben Dowa. Ben Dowa is the first fascicle in many of the versions of the Shobogenzo, his great work. And Ben Dowa is called On the Endeavor of the Way, which seems to be based on everything he learned there. So would somebody read the one that I handed out 3 of them. Somebody got something that says now?
Yeah, I do.
Would you read that? Here, let me give you this so that everybody.
Now, all ancestors and all Buddhas who uphold Buddha Dharma have made it the true path of unfolding enlightenment to sit upright, practicing in the midst of receptive samadhi. Those who attained enlightenment in India and China followed this way. Thus, teachers and disciples intimately transmitted this excellent art as the essence of the teaching.
Thank you. Sit upright, practicing. Sit upright, practicing. Just like everybody did in India and China before us. All those ancestors. So then, Dogen, being a man of many words, said, okay, that's not enough. 2 years later, in 1233 current era, he wrote Fukan Zazenji, which is usually seen as an appendix to the Shobogenzo. It's not really one of the official fascicles. And by the way, if you're not into Dogen yet, get into Dogen. A fascicle is a chapter. They just call it a chapter, a fascicle. It's a chapter. I urge you to. I know that Lori has read some Dogen, maybe even studies Dogen. Good. I love Dogen. I really urge. Our Soto Zen practice is based on Dogen's teachings. Anyway, so Dogen wrote Fukan Zazenji, which is recommending Zazen to all people. In this one, he reminds us that we should remember how Shakyamuni Buddha, Bodhidharma, and other ancient sages sat upright, facing walls for extended periods of time. And to the point here, Dogen says that we should stop searching, this is a quote, stop searching for phrases and chasing after words. Take the backward step and turn the light inward. So turn the light inward. Take the backward step and turn the light inward. Any ideas what he means by that?
Sit.
Say that again.
Sit.
Sit. Okay.
I mean, sometimes.
Okay.
It's like the diagram that Susan showed me in the timer class, which is the wheel, the hub, and the spokes kind of. So I think he's talking about the hub, and he's like use the spokes to kind of check out the hub, what's going on in there.
Okay. I like that. Check out the hub. Okay.
And come home.
And come home.
Come home to the body.
Come home to the body. Come home to awareness. That's how I interpret it. Come home to awareness. So here we are again, awareness.
Could I have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, about the stepping back.
Mm-hmm.
So the step back.
So stop searching for phrases and chasing after words. Just take a step back and turn the light inward. Slow down.
So chasing after words is what you were saying about the rim, which is everything up here.
Yeah.
The words, the thoughts, the
thoughts.
concepts, the stories, the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Drop it.
So step back means taking that space.
Yeah, the gap. Find the gap. I think maybe Dogen scholars might disagree with half of what I'm saying, but this is my talk.
I think also it implies stop chasing after the next phrase or book or teaching.
So basically Dogen is saying all of this happens through sitting. Just happens through sitting. Can someone read the one that reads, now steadfastly? Now sit steadfastly. Okay, wait.
Now sit steadfastly and think not thinking. Can you hear me? Okay. How do you think not thinking? Beyond thinking. This is the essential art of Zazen. This is simply the Dharma gate of enjoyment and ease. It is the practice, realization of complete enlightenment. Realize the fundamental point, the point free from the binding of nets and baskets. Know that the true Dharma emerges of itself, clearing away hindrances and distractions.
Thank you, Benta. Clearing away hindrances and distractions. Seems like Dogen is talking about a form of mind training here. Through Zazen, we can train our minds to clear away hindrances and distractions. Okay, fine. Yeah, right. Except that I think it's a lifetime practice to do these things. Absolutely a lifetime practice. And to this point, let me just read you a poem by Gary Snyder. On top. All this new stuff goes on top. Turn it over, wait and water down from the dark bottom, turn it inside out, let it spread through, sift down even, watch it sprout, a mind like compost. And if you've ever made compost, you know it takes a long time. Really. Absolutely. I love this poem. Gary Snyder, great Zen poet. It's called On Top. All this new stuff goes on top. Turn it over, wait and water down from the dark bottom. Wait and water down from the dark bottom, turn it inside out. Let it spread through, sift down even, watch it sprout, a mind like compost. So I really like this because for me, it reminds me that this ain't going to happen overnight. You know, yeah, I'm sitting Zazen, and everything I want to happen from my sitting Zazen, still, it's like compost. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen even taking a course, as much as I think these courses are worthwhile, and they are. It isn't going to happen from taking a course. It's not going to happen from me taking a course in Dogen. It's going to happen by day after day after day sitting Zazen and training my mind. Now I'm moving closer to the... In the Theravada tradition, they follow the teachings of the Buddha through the Pali Canon. One of the books within the Pali Canon is the Dhammapada, a correct collection of teachings in verse form. Since I think we're all interested in training our minds, this quotation from the Dhammapada seems really relevant to me. Would somebody read the quote, "Mind is the forerunner"? Oh yes, you do, sorry.
Mind is the forerunner of all things. Speak or act with an impure mind. Suffering follows as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. Mind is the forerunner of all things. Speak or act with peaceful mind. Happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves.
Mind is the forerunner of all things. Thank you. Thank each of you who have read. I think this is a commentary on karma. Mind is the forerunner of all things. Speak or act with peaceful mind. Happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. I think it's also an instruction for training our mind. And since this comes from the Pali Canon, there should be some directions, because the Pali Canon are all the teachings of the Buddha, supposedly. But perhaps not explicitly in the Zen Arcana beyond Dogen's explicit instructions that you read from Bendoa and Fuga Zazenji. But I think there's support for gaining some instruction provided by the Buddha in the Satipatthana Sutra, commonly known as the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. So here we go here. Monks, always, monks, or bhikkhus. Monks, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of dukkha. Dukkha is suffering. and from discontent for acquiring the true method for the realization of nirvana, the four satipatthanas. What are the four? Here, monks, in regard to the body, a monk abides contemplating the body, diligent, clearly knowing and mindful, free from desires and discontent in regard to the world. The body. In regard to feelings, he abides contemplating feelings, diligent, clearly knowing and mindful, free from desires and discontent in regard to the world. In regard to mind, he abides contemplating the mind, diligent, clearly knowing and mindful, free from desires and discontent in regard to the world. Lots of repetition. In regard to dharmas, he abides contemplating dharmas, diligent, clearly knowing and mindful, free from desires and discontent in regard to the world. So, the Buddha always in these sutras, always lots and lots of repetition. And he's pointing to a basic practice concept. Through these four foundations, a person can become clearly knowing, aware, and mindful. Training the mind. The four foundations of mindfulness. Train the mind. Be in the same process that we practice as Zazen. And when you guys are teaching the foundations of the four the 7 foundations?
It's just the foundation.
Okay. The foundations of mindfulness, you're dealing with the body, you're dealing with the breath, you're dealing with feelings, you're dealing with the 10,000, the dharmas, the 10,000 things. You know, everything that's out there. And you're doing it over and over and over again. And that's training the mind. The Buddha's instructions are really clear. The more I thought about this. First, being aware of our breathing. Well, golly, I do that. That I do. I'm going to be really personalized here. That I do. And when I'm having a tough time, I go back to my breath. And when I first sit down, I notice my breath. In fact, sometimes I take a deep breath. Secondly, knowing the body, its postures, activities. And he in the Satipatthana, they get into the anatomical parts, they get into the elements, and even corpse decay. There's a whole sutra on sitting with corpses and paying attention to how all your viscera dissolve, and it's kind of just gross. But it's, anything, I think for our purposes, we can all forgive everything but postures, activities, and maybe some anatomical parts, like what we're doing with our hands, what we're doing with our feet. But posture. And I just unconsciously, but consciously sat up. How many times, you don't have to answer this, but do you really sit still in your meditation? How many times do you make slight movements? Just lots. Yes, okay. Yeah. Thirdly, we learn to recognize our feelings and mind. Here we can learn to recognize and deal with thoughts, desires, discontents, angers, attachment, greed. I put a picture on one of my pictures of the day, yesterday on Facebook. My 2 cats, one had the prime seat, and the other one, you could see her eyes. She was on the floor. She wanted that seat. And I wrote, apparently even cats have envy and greed. And finally, the fourth foundation provides us with an opportunity to learn from our experiences. As I said, the 10,000 dharmas. In the Genjo Koan, Dogen says to study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things. The myriad things are the 10,000 things, the dharmas. Everything that's there. Everything. Everything we encounter. Mental hindrances. The 5 aggregates. Sense spheres. All that awakens us. And by the way, the 5 aggregates aggregates are form, sensation, perception, mental formation, consciousness. I'm going to skip something here. Yeah. So now I come to the part I said would come later. Why did I elect to talk about the form foundations of mindfulness? Well, the key is right here in this little bracelet that I wear all the time. It's the grace bracelet. And I pay a lot of attention to the grace process. Gather your attention, recall your intention, attune to yourself, attune to others, consider why you're there, how to serve, and enter into the situation, whatever it calls for, and engage. So I was really, really thinking about this, and I read, of course, in, whoops, wrong book. Standing at the Edge, Joan Halifax's new book. There's a whole chapter here, or section, on grace, which when I read the book, I thought, oh, great, grace. I'm not thinking about it, but she doesn't really say where it came from. And I started really thinking about where did this grace model come from? And I had been reading about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I said, my gosh, I think it's from the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So I wrote her. And I said, I've come to think there's a significant relationship between the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the grace model. I wonder if you agree with this and if it was your intention. And she writes back, hi, dear Mark, yes, the 4 FDN apostrophe F foundations of mindfulness. Love you for wondering. That's her answer. And I thought, wow, yeah. Okay. So how do they fit in with grace? Great, I know the answer is right, but how? Well, let's go through the 4 foundations, the grace model and see. I'm not pretending that I get it all yet. I'm thinking about it. Gather your attention. By the way, I want to say something about the grace model. We're going to be teaching it again here, and if you haven't taken it with Pat and me, please, Eve has taken it, and Susan has taken it. Anybody else here? Please, it's great. It's really great. Not because we're taking it, because it's a model for your life.
We wrote testimonials.
I know, but they're not reading the testimony.
People should go back and look at our testimonials.
And Pat and I are going to go again in March, and can I say? And Christine is going too, to take, I'm not sure what the date is, March 8th, something like that? Yeah. So we're going to take training again. And Roshi has also taken the training out there. So more of us are taking it, and maybe we'll expand the teaching. Anyway, gather your attention. In this phase of the model, we're asked to notice, to be mindful. Gather your attention. Wake up. Where are you? Are you breathing? And that's really important. Are you breathing? When I was, years ago, when I left my wife, my first wife, when that marriage just fell apart, I was in pretty bad shape and was doing therapy. And my therapist was a Gestalt therapist. And he would say to me regularly, you're not breathing. Start breathing. Keep breathing. And I realized that if I didn't breathe, I couldn't be aware. I couldn't know. I couldn't even begin to explain, figure out, So breathe, pay attention, gather your attention. Ground yourself in your breath. Feel your feet on the floor. If you're sitting, feel the seat under your butt. Recognize your posture. If you're standing and you're about to go, if you're having a fight, notice you're having a fight. Notice your posture. Maybe even recognize your feelings and thoughts, moments of desire, anger, greed. I have to be right. Why can't I stop this? Neutral thoughts even. I think that when we gather our attention, we should probably, we could possibly be enacting each of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right then, in that one, I think. But I think it flows all through. Recall your intention. What do we want to do in this situation? Gather your attention. Okay, you're there. Now, recall your intention. What do we want to do in this situation? To be able to discern things that we have been to be able to discern this, we have been training our mind. We have to be training our mind to be able to recall our intention in the midst of a difficult situation, in the midst of revelry, recognizing that maybe not everybody's happy, in the midst of sadness, figuring out what's the cause of the sadness. Are we able to continue breathing when we recall our intention? I remember the second time I took the training, Joan Halifax asked some question. She was asking, she regularly does this, asks. And I said, I don't think that is just one thing. I think that the 5 parts of the grace model all circle around each other. One reinforces the other. And she said, I do too. I do too. So when you are recalling your intention, you better at the same time not let go of gathering your attention. Attune to yourself and the other. This is another way of recognizing and knowing our mind. In the Satipatthana Sutra, we're instructed to know the mind, the breath, the body, the feelings, before we can train ourselves. When we attune to self, we consciously focus on our breath, our body posture. So again, we're just going back. We're circling through the whole thing, gathering our attention, recalling our intention, attuning to self. Where are we right now? Our body posture, our feelings. What's our proclivity under these circumstances? Are we about to be in action? Attuning to self. Are we about to be in action, or are we listening? So often, one of the great things I'm working on for probably 3/4 of my life is to shut up and listen. And grace, the grace model has been great for me that way, really great. How is our posture? What might it be signaling to others? Attuning to the other is one of the elements of the myriad things, the 10,000 things. What do we see, hear, feel in our interaction with the other? It seems to me that this creates a dynamism. How they affect us, how we affect them. Back and forth. Think about right now, just think about a difficult situation you've been in with respect to another person. Is there anybody that can't? Can you recall how they perceived you and how you perceived them? What was your awareness? How mindful of all that I've spoken of here were you in that moment? So, attune to yourself, attune to the other. How are they affecting you? How might they be affecting you? And what's happening in them? If we can tell. Susan.
Not knowing and bearing witness.
Not knowing and bearing witness, right. Yeah. I was sitting there this morning looking at Glassman Roshi's picture. And I thought, maybe I should find a clown's nose and start this way because I don't know what I'm talking about at all here this morning. Not know, bear witness. Attune to yourself, attune to the other, just be there. Consider what will serve. Because we've trained our minds through sitting, through the foundations of mindfulness. Because we've trained our minds are in some form of positive awareness in an ongoing dynamic way, we may be able to serve the other in a beneficial way. This is, after all, the purpose of the Bodhisattva vow and the suggestions of our 3 pure precepts and of the 10 grave precepts and of the Gatha we read. Commit not a single unwholesome act. Cultivate a wealth of virtue. Train this mind of ours. Consider what will serve. Knowing that if you don't get the first 3 parts right, gather your attention, recall your intention, attune to self and other, you're not going to be able to serve that other person very well. Because you're not going to be in tune with yourself or them and the situation. Then enter and engage. Finally, when all this happens, we take the leap. We jump off the 10-foot pole, not knowing, just doing it. Nothing to lose and nothing to gain. I love that. Nothing to lose and nothing to gain. This is the loving, compassionate action that comes through our Zazen, from recognizing the 4 foundations of mindfulness as these 2 interact and allow us to train our minds. I think, in my humble opinion, man. So I have one last thing to read. I was going to ask various people to read it. I think I'll just read it myself. It's called An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. It's I found it in one of John Kabat-Zinn's book. It's by a person whose name is Portia Nelson. And it's from a book called There's a Hole in My Sidewalk, The Romance of Self-Discovery. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I'm helpless. It wasn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a, this is so funny to me. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in this same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it's there. I still fall in. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. That's all, folks. Thank you, Benta. So, thoughts about this? Comments? Feedback to me? Whatever? I think it's 10:40, so we have time. Or we can stop and go home. Lori.
I'm really grateful
that you... Hang on one sec.
I'm very grateful that you read that last poem. During a time of deep suffering before I got into Buddhism, I was just really having a really hard time in my life, and I kept ruminating over the mistake and lesson that I learned, and then it would take me deeper and darker into this depression that I was in, and it was really hard to get out of it, and I was clawing my way out. And I had a good friend who called me every day, and every day she'd say, "Stop falling in the hole." And I was like, "What hole? What do you mean?" And it just felt like that. I felt like I was in this deep abyss, and I had to claw my way out every time to get to some level of functioning. And she was like, "You keep falling in the hole. Stop falling in the hole." And I couldn't see the hole. And now I know what her reference was. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. You said something earlier about the way the monks look at suffering, to eliminate suffering. And I mean, how practical is that? Isn't it more about accepting suffering in life and moving on?
The question was basically, do we have to eliminate suffering or just accept it? I think this is a whole this is a whole training in Buddhism. This is what Buddhism is all about, right? This is about. I mean, from my point of view, to recognize suffering is part one. Part one. To eliminate suffering is an ongoing activity, and it has to do with our recognizing what we're doing in this world and how we see other things. So we might say, well, so I'm not going to be PC here. We might say, well, that jerk in the White House, you know, it's all his fault. Well, actually, that's not the point. The suffering comes from my seeing him as that jerk in the White House. So that's my beginning answer to you. Christine?
Just really quick.
Okay.
So, I was just going to say that what was really helpful to me what was really helpful to me is when the distinction was made that there is pain in the world, suffering is optional, right? So that distinction was, it's not about getting rid of all pain. That exists. But I don't have to add to it by exactly what you were saying, by creating suffering myself. Yeah.
Does that help? Sir? What's your name again? John. Yeah. Have you taken the foundation series here?
I took a few classes years ago.
Oh, come and it's all revised and revamped and new teachers and exciting.
I would just add, not to get in a long discussion, but just sort of when...
No, we want a long discussion.
Okay, but studying sort of the Mahayana path and being a bodhisattva is really taking your attention away from yourself and bringing it to the world. And until we declare that we give up our quest for nirvana, until we save all sentient beings, then we get there. So for me, that personally, there's something very profound in making that shift. But first we have to see the hole in the street.
And I'm not going to defend the Theravada path because I don't know enough about it, but it isn't that they don't care about suffering of others and eliminating it. It's just that they go about it a slightly different way, and the Mahayana path is as you described, the Bodhisattva path. Some other excuse me, questions or comments, or are we done? Oh, Eve.
Yeah, well, I was wondering about the relationship between the past and the present, or whether some of these facsimiles have a different way of looking at it. Because I was part of this, was engendered by, I was reading something somebody had written online about Alan Watts, and they were talking about being in the present moment, but talking about as if that meant ignoring the past. And I don't think it does. I mean that if you're aware of what is a result from Dharma, from all the things, the 10,000 things that are here in the present moment, but how they've unfolded, up to this point. So, and what came to my mind was the image of Indra's net, Susan, that you've depicted so beautifully. And that I thought, there was something there that that cuts across that boundary between past and present, that everything that's been up till now is, is part of where we are, and you can see that from the net. But so I just wondered if in the things you've been reading, if you can comment on that.
I'm getting great questions, but I can't answer that. I truly can't. I will tell you that I am studying Dogen, and we are about, well, I think maybe we'll get to Uji, which is time being, or being time, in about a year. We've been, we're on the fourth fascicle, well, if you include Fukan Zenji, the fifth fascicle, and it's taken us well over a year just to do these 5. And I'll talk about that privately. At any rate, but I know a little bit, and I really don't want to go beyond this, except that I know that Dogen somehow in Uji is saying that basically what you said, that how can you separate the moment of the past from the present? And as soon as the future is here, which is that moment right then, it's affected by the past. So the past and the present and the future are not discrete things, but this flow. And I can't say more than that. I really feel uncomfortable having said what I said, because it may be completely bollocksed. However, I just want to say that in terms of practice, I don't think that's what practice means. I think practice means just the repetitive motion of the attention to ourselves, to our minds, to our feelings, to our body. That's what I think practice is. And practice, I love the word practice, because in English practice means something different than practice means. It isn't just practicing like a piano. It's the embodiment of what you're doing is also your practice.
I'm reading Bernie Glassman Roshi's book, Infinite Circle, right now, and there's this part that I'm really stumped on. And he said that the past, present, and future are completely intertwined, and that whatever we're doing right now affects the past, because the past is part of the present. I was kind of really floored by that. I was like, wait, space and time is infinite, and it's
you get it, don't you? You do get that point.
Do I?
No.
I'm not so sure I do. I'm still ruminating on it like a koan. It's really kind of fascinating how whatever we're doing right now affects the Buddha at 500 BCE. It's like, how?
Literally or metaphor?
I don't know. Let's ask Bernie Glassman Roshi. Because whatever we're doing right now affects him.
I think it's kind of like, it's like the koan. It's like the koan that Roshi read last week. Is he alive or is he dead? As soon as you start thinking about the present, you're affecting your thought about the past. So the past isn't the same, because you've affected it by your experience subsequent to the past.
You can change one's subjective view of the past. It's just an opinion of memory.
Yeah.
It's
Just my opinion, man.
And the collective view, which is even a more powerful.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. I think, well, you are a, sorry, I blocked on the word. What's your training? Thank you. Yeah, I think anthropologists are fascinated by that.
Well, I have a friend colleague, whatever, he's working on the Confederacy and what people, he's been, doing, witnessing what's been happening in New Orleans around the debate about what to do about the statues of people from, Confederate leaders. And is very much engaged with that kind of
I love the koan, and I love the koan that Roshi talked about. Is he alive or is he dead? I really stuck on that for a long time until I realized, well, of course he's alive and dead at the same time. Of course.
But that's Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Schrodinger's. Yeah.
I'm not going to say it.
Oh, it's yours. You brought it up.
I know,
You can't
but-
get out of it.
Great,
by the way.
It has to do with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in quantum physics. Yeah, so I don't that
We have a whiteboard we're going to bring out here.
that you can't that the act of observation changes what's observed, and so you don't know if the cat is in the box. The question is the cat alive or dead? This was a thought experiment that Schrodinger did, and so he ended up saying, well, it's indeterminate. The cat is both, and you don't. It's not determined until you open the lid whether the cat's alive or dead. And there's a lot of science fiction writers that have played around with that, that whole thing.
It reminded me just now of the koan where the head monk kills the cat. Nonsense cat. I'm not going to get into that. It's a great koan also. Do you want to talk about that? You're looking like you do.
I mean, I can recite it if you want. Yeah, so these two groups of monks were fighting over a cat. I think they both wanted the cat or possession of the cat. It was probably like just a cat that hung out at a monastery, and they were like, some monks lived over here and some monks lived over here, and they were like, it's just having a big debate about this cat. And the Zen master walks up, he takes the cat, and he's just like, if anyone can give a word, they'll spare this cat's life. And no one could say anything, so the dude chopped it right in half, and then blood and just gross, that's very visceral kind of.
Literally.
Yeah, and then afterwards there's another character called Joshu, who was is in a bunch of other koans. But the master relayed him this story, and Joshu put his sandal on his head and walked away. And then the master said, "Oh, if you had been there, you would have saved the cat."
Thank you, Jokai. I remember when I was studying that with Roshi, I didn't want to believe that the cat was actually sliced in half. You too?
Remember, Roshi
Oh.
was saying that his mother was concerned when she heard the story that this is what he was, this is path he chose to follow.
What? You're studying and they're killing cats? Anything else? Wow, this has been wonderful, guys. Thank you.
Started with cats and ended with cats.
Yeah. It ended with my waking up at 4 a.m. with the cats. We did a nice circle. Yeah. I hope that what I did, get just a feedback. Did it make sense what I did this morning? Great. Thank you.